Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I am your host, Dr. Lesley Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. And we are still going through our principles of environmental justice. We are now at number 3, right? So we did number 1, the sacredness of the earth. We did number 2, which was about having public policy that is done with mutual respect for all people. And now we're at number 3. This is principle number 3. I want to just read it and just talk about it because we need to know what these principles are. Principle number 3, environmental justice mandates the right to ethical, balanced, and responsible uses of land and renewable resources in the interest of a sustainable planet for humans and other living things, right? So principle number 3, first of all, it mandates it. It mandates the right to ethical, balanced, and responsible uses of land and renewable resources in the interest of a sustainable planet for humans and other living things. So when we're talking about what the world would look like if we had environmental justice for everyone, what we're talking about with this principle is that we will make sure that the way we use our resources are balanced, ethical, and responsible. What do we mean by that? First, the idea of having a balanced use of your land and resources means that you're using it in a way that makes sense for all of us, including non-humans, the plants, the animals, the biosphere, everything around us, to be able to continue to sustain itself and to flourish. We're balancing it out. We're not just pouring all of our resources into one thing or to one avenue or into one industry or into one type of use. It's balanced. It's across the board to make sure we're all living sustainable, healthy lives. And so when we're talking about using these resources, we're trying to use them in a way that is just for all of us, for everyone, no matter how much you make, no matter where you live, no matter what color your skin is, no matter what part of the country you're living in, whether it's rural, whether it's urban, whether it's on the coast, whether it's in the middle of the country, everyone gets to enjoy and benefit from how we use these resources. And the resources that they're talking about in this principle are very specific. The land and renewable resources, renewable ones. It needs to be balanced and used responsibly. But they also talk about renewable resources, the ones that come back time and time again that we don't run out of. We need to use those resources to fuel the things that we do in our society and to protect the environment as a whole. So when we talk about producing energy, for instance, we don't need to be relying on coal and natural gas and all of the fuels that are dug out of the ground, these fossil fuels, these old, antiquated ways of producing electricity and energy. We don't need to rely on those. We need renewable resources, wind power, solar power, in some instances, hydroelectric power, things that we can continually rely on year after year, generation after generation. They will be renewable, they're sustainable, and they provide what we need to function as a society. It needs to be balanced. We can't just go all in on one thing. We need a diverse portfolio of renewable resources that we can all rely on continually to do what we have to do to get where we're going. And so we have to have it balanced. It has to be ethical. So it has to be respectful. It has to be done with integrity and honesty. And it has to be done in full transparency as things are being developed and built up and moved forward. We can't have backroom deals where we're taking resources and land from one group and transferring it to another. We can't have these backroom deals where all the water is being sucked up by some industry or some entity without the consultation of the people that live around there who rely on it as well for their own uses and their own recreation. We have to be ethical. We have to be open and honest. We can't have situations where people are unaware of how things are being done and how resources are being used while they're living in those communities, in those areas. It happens too often. It happens too often where a big, huge factory will come in or Google or Amazon or some multinational corporation will move in and they'll come and they'll suck up all of the resources, take up all the land, get all the groundwater, suck up all the rivers and the streams and the lakes and consume it for themselves, leaving the people who live there out with nothing, or worse, with the contamination that comes from those industries without having any recourse, without having a voice into what the decisions are surrounding those resources. It has to be done ethically. We can't just allow situations to take place where people who are present are unaware or unable to speak into the decisions that are being made. That goes back to principle 2, right? How policy is made, how decisions are made. It has to be done ethically. It has to be done transparently, in full view of everyone. So we talked about how it has to be balanced, it has to be ethical, and above all, it has to be responsible. What does that mean to be responsible for how you use land, how you use resources? Well, what it means is that you're using it in a way that accomplishes your goals and your objectives while still protecting the environment, and doing it in a way that's not reckless, that's not contaminating, and that's not belligerent to the people and to the life around you. It has to be responsible. You've thought it through. You've done the homework. You've done your analysis. You've consulted with the experts. You've looked at the environment as a whole, and you've decided that this is the best and most efficient and effective way to use these resources, and not just taking because you can and just discarding what you don't want and being wasteful and being a bad steward of what's around you. It happens too often. Sometimes you have so much power, so much influence, you don't actually think about what you're doing. You don't think about the ramifications of your actions. And so if you're just a large conglomerate, you're just a big factory, you think you have unlimited power and control, you just take whatever you want from everywhere, take it all in. You're not worried about what could happen to anybody else. You're not worried about what other people need or who's relying on those resources, that water, that soil, that land, that air. You're just taking what you can because you know you can do it. And then when you are done, you're just being wasteful, irresponsible. That's the issue. You need to be balanced, ethical, and responsible when you use these resources. That's what an environmental justice advocate would require from you. That's what environmental justice mandates for anyone who seeks to use all of these resources around us for whatever the purposes are. That is done ethically, responsibly, and is balanced. And the principle itself talks about land and renewable resources. And that's not an accident. Obviously, we all live on this land. This land is vast and it is there for humans and non-humans alike to build and to advance their own objectives. We want to grow as a society. We want to flourish. We want to be successful in whatever we're doing. And we need to make sure that we can do it in a way that's sustainable and that is just and equitable, which means we use the land responsibly. We recognize who's on it, who owns it. We enter into conversations, have discussions, and agree on ways forward that will benefit all of us as we make decisions on how land is used, how we are using it for things like agriculture, housing projects, and all kinds of business ventures, things like that. Even what we're going to reserve for nature, for recreation. What species are there? Are we going to protect ones that are endangered? Are we going to protect certain environments so life can continue to flourish? The rivers and the streams. We have to be thoughtful about these kind of things and mindful of what our actions can do to impact them. It's just common sense, but it has to be done and thought through so that we can continue to enjoy all that we have in front of us, all that's been set before us, because some things are limited. The land is limited. There's a limit. We're not making more land. There's a limit. When we use resources, if we keep using non-renewable resources, burning coal, mining for minerals, continuing to extract from the earth, we're going to run out at some point. there's not going to be enough to sustain societies as we grow and as we continue to expand. We have to use renewable resources. We have to transition to cleaner ways of producing energy, of building and doing construction, and all the things that require us to be thoughtful about how these things are being used. We have to continue to think that way and continue to operate that way. And all of this, being balanced, being ethical, being responsible, should be working towards what the principle says, which is a healthier, sustainable planet for humans and other living things, right? A sustainable planet, something that will continue to be a place where we want to live. We don't want to sacrifice parts of our world just in the short-term interest of certain individuals or certain companies or certain entities. We need to think long-term, be sustainable, and continue to push for policies and push for actions that continue to make our world a sustainable, healthy place to live in. And that's the principle. And environmental justice demands it. It mandates it. There is no way around this reality. If you don't use these resources ethically, responsibly, in a balanced manner, you are going to, first of all, set yourself back and future generations back because they want these things available for them. But more importantly, you're going to operate in an unjust way. It's going to be inequitable because I promise you, when it comes to land, when it comes to resources, the people with the power don't typically consider those without the power when they make decisions. And as a result, the vulnerable, the marginalized, the people who don't have a voice to seat at the table always bear the brunt of those in power when it comes to the quality of their environment and the quality of their life, right? Where would the pollution go when these factories and these industries begin to operate? They go into those neighborhoods, those poorer, non-white communities. Where does the smoke go? Where does the trash go? Where does the waste go? Into those areas. What about the roads and the traffic and all the different ways that you would try to build up the infrastructure around the factory to bring trucks in, to move things out? All of that goes through these neighborhoods, continuing to contribute to harmful pollution. Where the jobs go? They don't go to the people in those communities, do they? Because they might benefit from it. It actually comes from other places outside of those communities. So now people are commuting into the facility, which means more traffic, more air pollution, more degradation. All of these things happen because we're not putting this principle into practice. We're not thinking about how we can use these resources equitably, responsibly, in a balanced way. And that is what this principle requires of us. It's what it requires. And until that happens, you'll continue to see injustice. You'll continue to see inequity. You'll continue to see disproportionate impacts on health, on economic stability and mobility, on all the different markers of a healthy society, because the environment touches everyone and the environment touches every aspect of life. And so if we're not being responsible, if we're not considerate and engaging people who live in these communities, people who are going to be affected by these decisions, and we just allow the large companies to come in and take what they want and do what they want because we believe that their presence is going to be a net positive, then we're just sacrificing those communities in the interest of some other goal that's not the goal that those of us who fight for environmental justice want to see achieved. We want a healthy, clean, sustainable planet for humans and other living things. We like the planet. We like what we see around us. We like the birds and the trees and the rivers and the streams to be clean. We like animals and plants to be alive and well and flourishing. We like to see people and nature in harmony. And we can't do that if we ignore this principle. And if we choose not to use these resources in the ways that they should have always been used. I mean, now I get it. We made discoveries. Back in the 50s and 60s, people discovered oil. discovered coal and used it to fuel an industrial revolution. And at the time, that's all we knew, that these resources would be helpful in building up our societies and our economies. But we know better now. We have more research now. We have more innovation now, better technology now. And so we can do things like use renewable resources. We can do things like reduce our consumption, reduce our usage. We can have more efficient appliances, more efficient means of construction, more efficient ways of traveling. We can do lots of things differently now that would allow us to adhere to this principle of using our resources and our land responsibly, ethically, and in a balanced way. And so with that knowledge, environmental justice advocates, you know who you are. We're pushing for things to be done differently, things to be done in a better, healthier way. And we all benefit, not just the people on the back end of the factories who have to deal with the pollution, but also people working in those factories, in those facilities, in the coal mines, on the oil rigs. Your health is better. Your well-being is better if you have a different type of profession that's in a cleaner, healthier environment with better safety and better protection. You know it, and I know it. I know there's a nostalgic desire to see, hardworking people with coal on their hands and dirt under their fingernails, wearing hard hats and dirty, Dickies and all that stuff. And I'm sure there's a lot of pride in working those types of jobs and quote unquote fueling America. But let's just be honest. Your health is taking a hit. You're not being paid the way you should for the hazard that you're being subjected to because the coal corporations aren't compensating you properly. And the government itself isn't supporting you well enough. You're not getting the health care you need. You're not getting the leave that you need. You're not getting time off that you need. You're not being protected with the right equipment and the right structure in place to keep accidents from happening. Meanwhile, these industries are polluting, they're destroying environments, and they're decimating nature as a whole, the whole natural world, as these operations continue. And so nobody wants any of that. And so we need to transition away from those types of fuel sources, those types of non-renewable resources, and move into renewable ones that we can use responsibly and ethically and in a balanced way to move society forward. So that is principle number 3. I'm going to say it again. Environmental justice mandates the right to ethical, balanced, and responsible uses of land and renewable resources in the interest of a sustainable planet for humans and other living things. That's what environmental justice mandates. That is what the fight is for. It is for us to have a sustainable planet for every human being across the world and other living things that, first of all, we rely on for our own well-being and in of themselves have their own value and worth and deserve to be protected and conserved. That is what we're asking for. That's what the fight is for. That's the ultimate goal. And when we achieve that, everybody wins. There won't be a situation where someone has been harmed by our efforts to build a sustainable planet. We all win and we all benefit. And so with that, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Environmental Justice Lab, where we are for the people and the planet. We'll see you next time.